No? Okay, so shall I carry on? Okay, she's calling me. Hello.
So you can hear me, can you? Okay, but nobody can hear you at the moment. Okay, I've just realised I could text you at any time. I could text you any time anybody has a question or wants to interject. So if you just have your phone next to you, I'll do that. Like you know when you have podcasts or whatever and people put messages on. Wicked, okay. Okay. Okay, bye. So if anybody wants to interject at any time,
So,
let me know. Put your hand up.
Psychoeducational recovery. Let me just explain where that's come from. We did a piece of work with an organisation called Capita about 5 years ago, and they built a business case for us to be used by National Health and also by private practice. And we agreed that what we do is we've created a programme of psychoeducational recovery. So what does that mean? Well, we sit outside of psychology, basically. We don't practice psychology, we don't practice counselling or psychotherapy. What we do is entirely different. We, in the same way as I said earlier, that you can learn to be fit by training, what we do is the same as a personal trainer would do. We give you structure, education, reassurance and support that when it's a multifaceted approach, and when those come together, we ensure compliance, we give people a set of rules, and when compliance is absolute, they start to see recovery happening very quickly, like I did at the start. My whole intention from the start of this was to replicate what I did to recover for absolutely every single sufferer. So everything is done in a specific structure, and whether you use the online course or whether you come to a workshop or whether you come to the retreat, what we do is done in a very specific formula. There are people who think that they understand what the method is and how it works. They think that they can mimic it without having all of the tools and all of the reference guides and all of the... Now, it may be that a client doesn't use all of that stuff, but it's almost self-prescriptive. It's a self-help methodology, but it's wrapped up so that there's absolutely no question unanswered. So that, and I'm sure Jackie will tell you about this, if you have a question about any symptom, any thought, any process within your life, anything that you think could be preventing recovery or preventing you moving forward or removing your disorder, we have an answer for it. It's almost that those stock answers are within the portal, within the programme already. Now, if there's anything outside of that that is specific to a particular person, because everybody puts different language to these conditions. I had a guy at the last retreat who came to us, and his parents were very, very concerned because he was hearing voices. Now, obviously, he'd been to see a psychiatrist, and he had said that he was suffering from some form of psychosis. He didn't know what, and he was going to go back for further assessment, but decided to come to our retreat in the time between his two appointments. And on sitting and talking to him, it became very evident that whoever he'd been there, seen at the NHS, hadn't understood the language the guy had used to describe his experience. And of course, because I see so many people, because I've experienced it myself, because I've heard so many different explanations of this particular symptom he's experiencing, I could read behind it and see that this guy wasn't hearing voices at all. He was actually suffering from some form of pure. And the voices were basically his anxiety asking him to check. They were risk assessments. And so it's very easy to see why, and I helped a girl, for example, recently with an eating disorder who'd been to see somebody about her anxiety and her eating disorder. And ultimately, I mean, I won't go into the full story, but they had completely misread what it was she was experiencing because she was a 6-year-old girl. And she really didn't have the language or the experience, the sort of adult experience that we have to be able to vocalise exactly what she was experiencing. So she'd been for an assessment, and they'd completely misread it, and they put her on antipsychotic medication. They'd hospitalised her. Her parents were absolutely desperate, and they desperately asked me to go and see her, and I did. And it became immediately evident to me that they'd completely misread the situation. And the point I'm trying to make is that you can hear 1,000 different descriptions of exactly the same manifestation of anxiety, and it can be different every time. And it takes a lot of time and experience to understand those nuances of the language used by anxiety sufferers, to be able to get behind the symptoms, to get behind the condition, to reassure them that what they're experiencing is normal and accepted within an anxiety condition, and that they're not suffering from some horrendous disease or illness that is somehow manifesting as anxiety. Because most anxiety sufferers, their biggest worry is that there's something else going on that's remained undiagnosed and that is still looking for that, and that somebody has literally misdiagnosed what it is they're experiencing. And you can understand why that happens. But again, it's just another risk assessment. What if somebody's missed something? What if there's something growing in my head? What if I do have a heart condition? And of course, they're all on Google looking up every symptom and thought they have, and it's a self-perpetuating cycle. So psychoeducation gets behind that. What it does is it sets people up to give them structure. First of all, it gives them knowledge. So first of all, there's a whole bank of knowledge so that they can look at exactly what it is they're experiencing and get immediate reassuring advice, so they can put that aside, at least momentarily, so that their brain then switches off some of the high-level fear response. Then they get reassurance. So of course the reassurance comes from understanding their condition, understanding that what they're experiencing isn't going to kill them, that the palpitations aren't a heart attack, that this churning stomach isn't stomach cancer, that the tightness in the head isn't a brain tumour, and so on. Because once you've had that reassurance, although it's happening in quick succession next to the knowledge that you've just gained, what happens is you get an immediate ramping down of fear. Not necessarily the disorder, the anxiety, but of the fear. And of course, once you've got them to that point, they start buying into the whole concept of recovery, because they're already feeling better in a short period of time. And then you give them structure. And the structure is a day structure. Just like a personal trainer would give somebody if they were going to a gym. You do this, this, and this, and you do it in these quantities at this time, and we close up the gaps, and we give you compliance policing. And then there's a support, and the support is obviously compliance support. So what we do is we say, okay, what are you doing now? Is it working? Could we refine it and make it work more effectively? What did you do yesterday to make you feel that way? And what would you change today to make you feel differently? So all of the support that we provide is compliance support. And that's what we package as psychoeducational recovery. And that's a very simplistic explanation, because it's far more in depth than that. And of course, if you shadowed our support staff and listen to the huge variety of conversations they have, you'd understand that. But again, that comes through experience of having spoken to tens of thousands of people. The whole thing came about because I wanted to deliver what I said earlier, I wanted to deliver what I would have needed to start a 4-year-old child. What I now know is the solution. And when I give that and show that to 4-year-old children, they no longer suffer. Of anybody, of any age, actually. Children are fantastic to treat, by the way, because they're in that sort of hypnagogic state, in that learning state where they just accept what you say as truth, and they get it immediately. So much so that sometimes, there's a girl on our website that you can watch her video. Her name's Holly, and if you watch her video, you'll see that she said that within a week she was perfectly normal again. She came out of the Priory in London on a Friday, came to see me Saturday morning. That afternoon she had a makeover. She got herself back into school. She was playing guitar and singing at the local pub by the Thursday. She completely changed her life in probably 3 or 4 days. But certainly when she left my office, she went and had she was a goth. She was a 14-year-old goth, came out self-harming, bleeding arms, bandages, panic disorder, OCD. You can see her video, she describes it herself, and her mum talks about it as well. And literally in that hour and a half that I spent with her, as a 14-year-old, that learning, that ability to take on information and for it to neurologically implant itself happened. And I know it sounds almost miraculous, but the girl walked away what I would call anxiety-free. And then she started to regain her life and the momentum that a 14-year-old girl should have in her life. And by the following week, she was back at school and extremely happy. So that's how quickly it can happen. I'm just going to have a look down my list that Jackie and I discussed. Okay, one thing that Jackie and I discussed was obviously when we get certain clients, especially at the retreat, because I have direct access to them, we sometimes have clients arrive in wheelchairs, we have people arrive on crutches, we have people arrive with all kinds of conditions, chronic pain conditions, sometimes life-limiting, life-shortening illnesses. Recently we had a lady who came to the retreat who she had terminal cancer. She didn't have long at all. She's in her late 70s, in a wheelchair, and she hadn't been out of the wheelchair for 9 months. And her husband brought us to the retreat, and in those 4 days, her anxiety levels dropped massively, and she was able to go away feeling confident and happy that she was no longer as frightened as she was previously. And so we removed the disordered part of her fear responses. She still had fear. You know, the lady was leading a very limited life, and of course she had fear, but it was appropriate fear, it wasn't inappropriate fear. And that's the massive difference. And of course, with that reduction in the fear response, you get the whole endocrine system starts to settle, digestion starts to normalise, your heart rate, all of the systemic the systems of the human body settle back to normal behaviours, because without that adrenal response, that's what they're programmed to do. And she went away very happy. In fact, on the Thursday night, she danced with her husband for the first time in 5 years. And it was a beautiful thing. The guy came to play the guitar for us all, and she got up and she danced. She got out of the wheelchair. It was the first time she'd actually walked or done anything unaided for a very long time. The point is this. People come to us with a wide range of life experiences, traumas. We help people that have been in war, so injured in war, people with PTSD. We help people with all manner of physiological conditions, because people have these things. They're separate to anxiety, but they do have these things. And what I always say to people, whether they come to us with ME or CFS or chronic fatigue syndrome, or myalgic encephalomyelitis, or fibromyalgia, or cancer, or any form of pain disorder. We had treated a guy with what's called stiff man syndrome, where his leg would go into a seizure and flick up behind his back and break the bones in his leg, which was exacerbated hugely by his anxiety. Obviously, he's an ex-military guy. It doesn't matter what people come to us with. If they have a disorder, an illness, a disease, as well as anxiety, once we've removed the anxiety, what happens is, without exception, is that their fear levels drop to a normal level, which is phenomenal in itself. But what also happens is that systemically, and especially the endocrine responses, go back to normal. And once they've normalised, it means that anything else that the endocrine system, that the respiratory system, that the heart is meant to be doing, will be done with efficacy. That instead of firing on the one cylinder, that they've been firing on to live a normal life, because the other 3 cylinders have been working on anxiety responses, they then regain all of their physical and mental attributes, pull them back from the anxiety condition, and have them there when they need them to respond appropriately to whatever life throws at them. And that is literally whatever life throws at them, not just illness, but anything. And what you find is that once people have recovered, and once they've taken the multifaceted approach that we help them to achieve, and once they've reached that point where they've gone over the what I call the pinnacle of recovery, and I'd say it's a bit like being on a drag lift when you're skiing. Golden rule number 1, don't let go of it until your skis go past horizontal, and then you ski off safely. But you must know when that recovery comes, and once those skis have gone over the pinnacle of recovery, and you know that you're in recovery, you can do whatever you like. And ultimately, we've never had a person do that and go back to suffering from anxiety. In fact, I believe it's impossible to do. When I recovered, I was always kind of waiting for the moment where something would reactivate. When my nan, who was my best friend, died, or when I had a car crash or something catastrophic happened. But ultimately, when those things did happen, I dealt with them more effectively and with more emotional clarity than the people around me, surprisingly. And that is the predominant experience of all the people we've helped. Because I genuinely believe that when you're born with the predisposition to suffering from these conditions, and there is a predisposition, a genetic predisposition, not everybody can suffer from an anxiety condition. I think it's around 20 to 30%. I think it's an increasing number, but that's to do with evolution and the fact that children are exposed to higher and higher levels of incoming data, which is basically programming them to have high level intellect. And it's that high level intellect that genetically predisposes people to suffering from these conditions. Because ultimately they can do higher level risk assessments. So what recovery means, somebody asked me this morning actually, somebody from the NHS said, well, when you talk about recovery, what do you mean, Charles? And I said, it's very simple. Recovery is complete removal of a disorder or illness. or condition or disease. But that's what recovery is. Recovery isn't learning to manage it. It isn't accepting it into your life. It isn't coping. It's removing a disorder or illness completely. And in the last 22 years, the 260-odd thousand people we've helped, all I've ever seen is recovery. And we recently had a gentleman come to us who was head of CAMS for a CCG locally, and he spent 4 days at our retreat, and he actually pulled me aside at the end of the retreat and said, "This is something I've never witnessed before." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Recovery." He said, genuinely, he said, "I've seen these people recovering. They may not all be there yet, but they're certainly on their way, and there are a few, I would say, are recovered." Certainly from my perspective as a psychiatrist. And his name was Jonathan, and I said, "Jonathan, that's shocking, but wonderful to hear." And he wants to get involved on a professional level with our organisation, because, like he said, he's never seen anything like it. And it's what we pride ourselves on, because, you know, as ex-sufferers, we've dedicated our lives. Yes, we've run a business, but we've dedicated our lives to helping people to truly recover. And I genuinely believe that, you can, because I'm here, and I think Jackie would agree, and the evidence is overwhelming. We're the only people that do psychoeducational recovery. We were the first ever online counselling provision in the world, as far as I know. We've done our research and nobody was before us, I'm assuming we were. We've been around a long time, and what we do really does genuinely work. I'm just looking down my notes, Jackie, that we wrote. Yeah, one thing you asked me, Jackie, that I will answer is, you were talking about how to avoid suffering. So if there was somebody that was predisposed, how to avoid them from ever suffering. Ultimately, there is a process to do that. Suffering is when somebody is predisposed to suffering, it's almost that there's nothing they can do currently, at least, they're walking on a knife edge, is what I'm trying to say. Like I was. I only walked on it till I was 4. There are people that walk on it into their 60s and 70s. We had a guy at the last retreat that retired as high up in the bank, and within 3 weeks of retiring, his best mate died on the golf course, and the next thing is he's having panic attacks. He never thought for a second that he had that predisposition. He'd never experienced any kind of anxiety in his life. So if you're carrying that ability to suffer, it can actually activate at any time during somebody's life. And it's usually as a result of a high fear response. So it would be as a result of trauma or loss or injury or something else. But ultimately, that's the catalyst and not the cause. The cause is the core predisposition to suffering. Yeah, I've reached the end of my notes there, Jackie. So I don't know. Did that all make sense? I'm hoping I haven't missed anything. Okay. Oh. Hi.
Hi. So no one can hear you apart from me. So I was going to say, yeah, also there was that little bit that you talked about, I think, in the manual about the strengths of the anxiety-prone mind. Yeah, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that, about how it's not always a negative thing, about, how the kind of thinking outside of the box style of mind. And yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that?